On Sunday morning, February 22, 2026, smoke began curling into the sky above Puerto Vallarta. American tourists and beachfront hotels woke to a deep, percussive sound that rattled windows and echoed off concrete walls, something that at first felt like construction or demolition, the kind of noise people try to ignore on vacation. But this was no building project. Within hours, burning vehicles were blocking major highways across western Mexico. Gunfire crackled in the distance. Panic swept through the Guadalajara airport as travelers sprinted through terminals, abandoning luggage, crouching behind counters, searching for exits. The United States Embassy issued urgent alerts, telling Americans across multiple Mexican states to lock their doors and stay inside. It's the chaos traced back to a single military operation in a remote mountain town called Tepalcatepec, roughly 2 hours southwest of Guadalajara. Mexican special forces had just eliminated the most wanted drug trafficker on the planet, Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, founder and supreme leader of the Jalisco New Generation cartel, was dead. For more than a decade, he had evaded capture while building one of the most violent, disciplined, and profitable criminal organizations in modern history. The United States government had placed a $15 million bounty on his head. The DEA ranked him alongside El Chapo as one of the most dangerous criminals alive. And now, after years of manhunts, ambushes, and failed operations, he was gone. But to understand why his death instantly ignited nationwide chaos, you have to understand the man who built an empire from fentanyl and blood, and why removing him sent shockwaves through an entire country. Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes was born in 1966 in the rural western state of Michoacán. Much of his early life remains deliberately obscured, but official records show a man who once lived an ordinary existence. He worked as a police officer. He farmed avocados. At some point, that life ended. In the late 1980s, he crossed illegally into the United States and settled in California. There, he entered the drug trade. He was arrested on heroin trafficking charges and deported back to Mexico. But the setback was temporary. He returned to the United States, resumed trafficking, and in 1992 was arrested again. This time, he served 3 years in federal prison before being released on parole and deported a second time. When he returned to Mexico, there was no attempt to go straight. He reconnected with trafficking networks, learned from veteran criminals, and began positioning himself inside the underworld. His rise accelerated after a pivotal moment in 2010. When Mexican security forces killed Ignacio Coronel, a powerful Sinaloa cartel leader. Coronel's death shattered his organization, leaving territory, roots, and power structures up for grabs. Oseguera Cervantes recognized the opportunity immediately. By 2011, he and a small circle of loyal allies had formed what they called the Jalisco New Generation cartel, named for the western state that would become their stronghold. From its inception, CJNG rejected the old cartel model. When this was not a loose federation of traffickers, it was a militarized organization. They invested heavily in weapons, training, and command structure. They recruited former soldiers and police officers. They acquired rocket-propelled grenade launchers, armored vehicles, encrypted communications, and battlefield tactics. They pioneered the use of weaponized drones, dropping explosives on rivals and security forces alike. They planted landmines along rural roads to slow government pursuit. This was not just a cartel, it was a private army. But brute force was only part of the strategy. CJNG also mastered propaganda. They released videos portraying themselves as protectors of the people, framing rival cartels as predators and themselves as guardians. During the COVID pandemic, the CJNG members distributed food packages and toys in vulnerable communities, carefully filmed and widely shared. The message was calculated: loyalty through fear, compliance through assistance, brutality hidden behind staged generosity. In April 2015, CJNG demonstrated its true nature. Gunmen ambushed a convoy of state police officers in Jalisco, blocking the road with burning vehicles before opening fire with machine guns and grenade launchers. 15 officers were killed. 5 more were wounded. It was one of the deadliest single attacks on Mexican security forces in modern history. 1 month later, the cartel escalated again. Mexican military helicopters were pursuing a convoy believed to be protecting El Mencho himself. The operation was designed to finally capture him. As one helicopter passed overhead, a CJNG gunman fired a rocket-propelled grenade. The aircraft went down in flames. 9 law enforcement officers died. It was the first time organized crime had successfully shot down a military helicopter in Mexico's drug war. The message was unmistakable. CJNG was willing and able to fight the state directly. The attack stunned the Mexican government. President Enrique Peña Nieto publicly vowed to dismantle CJNG and capture El Mencho at any cost. Resources were mobilized, intelligence units were activated, but momentum collapsed when El Chapo escaped from prison for a second time in July 2015, humiliating the government and consuming national attention. El Mencho exploited the distraction. While the world watched Sinaloa, CJNG consolidated territory, eliminated rivals, and expanded its reach. As the cartel grew, so did its product line: cocaine, heroin, methamphetamine, but the real money came from something far deadlier: fentanyl, a synthetic opioid up to 100 times more potent than morphine. Just 2 milligrams could be fatal. CJNG became one of the primary suppliers, flooding American cities with counterfeit pills laced with lethal doses. El Mencho's own son, Ruben Oseguera Gonzalez, known as El Menchito, played a central role. Evidence presented in U.S. court showed that in 2013 he pledged to build an empire from fake oxycodone pills mixed with fentanyl. He promised scale, he promised speed, and he delivered. At the height of the opioid crisis, more than 110,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in a single year. The majority involved synthetic opioids, primarily fentanyl. Families across the country lost children, parents, worsened siblings to pills that looked legitimate but carried death inside them. El Menchito was extradited to the United States in 2020. In September 2024, he was convicted on drug trafficking and weapons charges. In March 2025, a federal judge sentenced him to life in prison plus 30 years and ordered him to forfeit over $6 billion in drug proceeds. Prosecutors said he was responsible for trafficking more than 50 metric tons of cocaine, overseeing drug labs that produced over 1,000 metric tons of methamphetamine, and ordering more than 100 murders. His father, meanwhile, remained free. El Mencho cultivated myth and mystery. He rarely appeared in public. All known photographs were decades old. He surrounded himself with multiple security rings and reportedly employed over 100 people solely to set ambushes for anyone who came too close. He never stayed in one place for long. For years, it worked. The United States steadily raised the bounty on his head until it reached $15 million. He became one of the most wanted fugitives on Earth. CJNG expanded into at least 21 of Mexico's 32 states. The DEA reported cartel presence in all 50 U.S. states. CJNG emerged as the primary rival to the Sinaloa cartel. In June 2020, they proved their reach by attacking Mexico City's police chief, Omar Garcia Harfuch, in a wealthy neighborhood using grenades and high-powered rifles. He survived. 3 others did not. The attack showed CJNG could strike anywhere. In January 2025, the Trump administration returned to power and made cartel operations a central focus. In February, CJNG was designated a foreign terrorist organization, placing it alongside groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Anyone providing material support now faced terrorism charges. President Trump publicly threatened military action if Mexico failed to act. Pressure mounted on Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. Then came Sunday, February 22, 2026. Acting on intelligence from a newly formed U.S.-Mexican Joint Task Force, Mexican Special Forces launched a raid in the mountain town of Tepalcatepec. The target was El Mencho himself. As troops moved in, gunfire erupted. A fierce firefight followed. 4 CJNG members were killed. El Mencho and 2 others were wounded and captured. During transport to Mexico City, El Mencho died from his injuries. Authorities seized armored vehicles and rocket launchers capable of destroying aircraft. 3 Mexican soldiers were wounded but survived. Mexico's defense ministry confirmed the killing. U.S. officials called it a major victory, but celebration lasted only hours. Almost immediately, CJNG unleashed a coordinated response. Buses and trucks were hijacked, torched, and used to block highways. Smoke poured over Puerto Vallarta. Vehicles burned in Guadalajara. Violence spread across at least 9 states. Jalisco's governor declared a state of emergency, suspended public transportation, and urged residents to stay indoors. 21 highways were blocked. Schools were closed. At Guadalajara's airport, passengers ran for cover. In Puerto Vallarta, panicked tourists were escorted across runways. Major airlines suspended flights. The US, Canada, and the UK issued shelter-in-place warnings. Ride services shut down. One American tourist said he thought construction was happening outside his hotel. Instead, it was a country unraveling. This response was expected. Cartels have long used chaos to demonstrate power, but the speed and scale revealed how deeply CJNG's influence ran, even with its founder dead. Now the question is, what happens next? Experts warn that killing kingpins can fracture cartels, ignite internal wars, and increase violence. After El Chapo's capture, Sinaloa descended into conflict. CJNG now faces the same crossroads. El Mencho's wife was arrested. His son is imprisoned for life. Other family members have been captured. Potential successors remain, but none command the same fear. For the United States, the operation was a success. For Mexico, the future remains uncertain. Demand in America still fuels the trade. Weapons still flow south. Overdose deaths have declined, but 80,000 Americans still die each year. As smoke cleared and airports reopened, one truth remained. El Mencho is dead, but the empire he built is not.